let's get started. Each of the characters are separated into 4 different roles: initiators, duelists, controllers, and sentinels. We'll be starting with the initiators first, whose core design is to create short windows of opportunity for you and your team to execute, and you do this by disrupting opponents. We'll start with the newly revealed hero Breach, and his first ability is Aftershock. You can only buy 1 charge of this ability and it costs 100 credits. You equip a fusion charge, you fire it against a wall and it does heavy burst damage to anybody that's on the other side of that wall. It pretty much one-shots an enemy if they're stood right next to the wall, but damage does fall off the further away you get from that area. This ability can do damage to yourself and your teammates. Friendly fire with guns, however, is not a part of the game. You can't shoot your teammates and kill them, but you can do damage to them with certain abilities. They do take 33% of the normal damage, as it is reduced if you hit allied targets. The second ability is Flashpoint. You can buy 2 charges of this, and each of them costs 200 credits. You fire a blinding charge through a wall that blinds all players looking at it. This is what it looks like when you are flashed by this ability, and you can see which enemies are flashed by the white effect that appears over their face. You can also flash your teammates and yourself with this ability. In regards to counterplay, there is this little icon that shows up just before the flash comes out, so you can look away in time, but the duration of you being flashed is a lot shorter. Now let's go over Breach's signature ability. Every character in Valorant has one, and for the most part they tend to be free at the start of every round. With Breach, his signature has a 35-second cooldown. Breach's signature ability is called Fault Line. It's an ability that dazes all enemies caught within its zone. Holding the E button extends the zone and you can see how far this reaches on a minimap. It goes through walls and line of sight, so you can catch a lot of people out with it. This is what the daze effect looks like if you're hit by it. Being dazed affects your vision, it affects your movement speed, which is reduced, and it also reduces your fire rate with all guns. The effect lasts about 3 seconds for Fault Line. This ability does no damage, however, and you can daze your teammates with this ability too. Every character has an ultimate ability. You can't buy them, you have to earn them with points, and Breach's ultimate, Rolling Thunder, costs 7 points to use it. You fire a cascading quake through all terrain in a large cone. The quake dazes and knocks characters up into the air that are caught within its zone. This again includes teammates. It's like a bigger, stronger version of the Fault Line ability that we just highlighted. It fires in waves, so you can avoid it to an extent, but it dazes enemies for around 6 seconds instead of 3. It doesn't, however, do any form of damage, so it's only really a stun. Now that we've gone over all of Breach's stuff, let's go on to Sova, who is the other initiator. His first ability is the Owl Drone, where you deploy a pilotable drone that flies around for about 10 seconds. And you can also fire a projectile at enemies which hit them with a tracker. The tracker does no damage, but it pulses their position 3 times, and there's nothing that they can do to remove the tracker. Your allies will also be able to see where this enemy is too. Enemies can kill the drone whilst it's flying around, and they can also kill you whilst you're flying the drone, so they'll be just stood out in the open. The next ability is Shock Bolt. You have 2 charges of this and each of them cost 100 credits, and it's a damage dealing ability. If the Shock Bolt hits an enemy towards the center of its radius, it will do about 90 damage, but on the outskirts it will drop down to about 45. Charging up the shot allows it to fly farther. You can also enable a bounce effect by pressing the right click button. Pressing it once will have the Shock Bolt bounce once. Pressing it twice, it bounces twice. This bolt, however, can do damage to you and your teammates, but like I said before, it's all reduced. Sova's signature ability is the Recon Bolt. Like Breach's signature, Recon Bolt has a 35-second cooldown. You fire a bolt that deploys a sonar emitter. The sonar pulses, tagging nearby enemies, causing them to be revealed for you and your team. Mechanics wise, it's the exact same as the Shock Bolt, being able to bounce it and fire it farther. The bolt pulses outwards and shows where enemies are in that second, and it pulses up to 3 times. The pulse doesn't go through walls or line of sight. You can also hide yourself with smokes and wall abilities, and the bolt can also be destroyed. If you manage to hit an enemy with the bolt itself, it does 0 damage, but it does reveal them as they move around, and there's very little that they can do about it. Finally, we have Hunter's Fury, which fires up to 3 deadly energy blasts that hits over a pretty large distance. Each enemy that's hit takes heavy damage and is marked. The energy blasts do 80 damage, and they have no fall off. Regardless of whether they're stood in front of you or right at the back, they'll take that damage. The ability is also HITSCAN, it's an instant hit, and it can also travel through walls and terrain. You can see the effective range of this ability on the minimap before you use it. Like I said, it marks enemies, it shows where they are for you for 1 second, where it's only visible for you, so you can line up the other shots if you want. But the trajectory of this ability is visible to the enemies, so it can be avoidable for them. That's it for all of the initiators so far. Let's move on to the duelists.